Welcome to the first mini-episode of The Ones Who Didn't Make It, a podcast where we will discuss the history of left-wing movements who never made it into the governing seat, accomplished their goals, and eventually fizzled or were stamped out. I'm Jackson, and today I will be discussing the repression of the Black Panther Party and COINTELPRO. To start, a brief overview of the now dissolved organization known as the Black Panther Party is necessary. The Black Panther Party was a militant African-American and Marxist-Leninist organization formed by founding members Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Their first actions they became most well known for at the time were to monitor police, predominantly white and racist within the black communities which the two were a part of, armed with open-carry guns. These actions, which often became open arguments between the Panthers and the police, showed to the black communities that another route of self-defense could protect them from the white supremacist violence carried out in these areas. The Panthers would then move to defend the community's ability to arm themselves openly in this way. Most notably is the event where the Panthers entered the California state legislature in Sacramento and had a scuffle with legislature security over the fact that they were carrying guns. They were there to oppose a bill put forward by the racist Assemblyman Don Mulford, AB 1591. They would give the following address to the press after being released. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense calls upon the American people in general and the black people in particular to take careful note of the racist California legislature, which is now considering legislation aimed at keeping the black people disarmed and powerless at the very same time that racist police agencies throughout the country are intensifying the terror, brutality, murder, and repression of black people. At the same time that the American government is waging a racist war of genocide in Vietnam, the concentration camps in which Japanese Americans were interned during World War II are being renovated and expanded. Since America has historically reserved the most barbaric treatment for non-white people, we are forced to conclude that these concentration camps are being prepared for black people, who are determined to gain their freedom by any means necessary. The enslavement of black people from the very beginning of this country, the genocide practiced on the American Indians, and the confining of the survivors on reservations, the savage lynching of thousands of black men and women, the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and now the cowardly massacre in Vietnam, all testify to the fact that towards people of color, the racist power structure of America has but one policy: repression, genocide, terror, and the big stick. Black people have begged, prayed, petitioned, demonstrated, and everything else to get the racist power structure of America to right the wrongs which have historically been perpetrated against black people. All of these efforts have been answered by more repression, deceit, and hypocrisy. As the aggression of the racist American government escalates in Vietnam, the police agencies of America escalate the repression of black people throughout the ghettos of America. Vicious police dogs, cattle prods, and increased patrols have become familiar sights in black communities. City Hall turns a deaf ear to the pleas of black people for relief from this increasing terror. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense believes that the time has come for black people to arm themselves against the terror before it is too late. The pending Mulford Act brings the hour of doom one step nearer. A people who have suffered so much for so long at the hands of a racist society must draw the line somewhere. We believe that the black communities of America must rise up as one man to halt the progression of a trend that leads inevitably to their total destruction. The act would pass and outlaw the original practice which the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was known for. Due to this, there was a need to transition the party to other practices to remain practically relevant to the black communities they aim to represent and achieve the empowerment, survival, and improvement of. The party would transition to a broader political sphere after its initial debut, producing the second edition of its magazine with the help of Eldridge Cleaver's friends at Ramparts Magazine. This edition would produce the document called What We Want Now, What We Believe, which would later be referred to as the 10-Point Program, laying out the social demands of the party. I'd highly advise people to pause, read that document, and come back. This document would serve as a basis for their future programs which centered the material situation of poor black communities around the country. This included, but was not limited to, free breakfast programs for children which fed thousands, free sickle cell anemia testing, free ambulance services, and free busing to prisons. These programs were called the Survival Programs and worked under Huey P. Newton's slogan, quote, "Survival pending revolution," end quote. centering that these could not be the end goal of the black community, that only revolution could liberate the black and other oppressed poor of the country from both the racist infrastructure of the country and capitalist exploitation. This radical grassroots organization of 40 branches with up to 10,000 members at its peak turned them into a target for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with the FBI Director John Edgar Hoover saying that, quote, "The Black Panther Party, without question, represents the greatest threat to the internal security of the country," end quote. The FBI created the Counterintelligence Program, known as COINTELPRO, in order to infiltrate, surveil, inhibit, and destroy organizations and movements which were deemed quote-unquote subversive. A considerable amount of effort was put into putting informants in high places. The most notable example is that of William O'Neal, which was picked up under felony charges of grand theft auto. In return for dropping the charges, William was required to be an informant for COINTELPRO. He was able to infiltrate the party and became one of the heads of security within the organization. Another notable example, due to his prolific writing, is the informant Earl Anthony. Earl Anthony was an early member of the radical movements in the 1960s and 1970s, eventually being physically and legally threatened by two FBI agents, Kaczynski and O'Connor, whom he knew outside of that capacity. They said he was being investigated for a draft building bombing, and that all charges would be dropped if he became an informant for the FBI, targeting the Black Panther Party. After a laughing refusal, he was beaten unconscious by the agents and given the ultimatum once again at gunpoint once conscious again. He would later say, quote, "I agreed, and as far as I know, became the first of dozens of Black Panthers who were to accept the same type of deal from the FBI's COINTELPRO division," end quote. COINTELPRO was not confined to information gathering and infiltration. These informants would be used to stoke pointless and deadly conflicts between organizations of similar movements. Earl Anthony was elevated to be Eldridge Cleaver's right hand after Seal and Huey's imprisonment. Anthony would exacerbate the issues with Cleaver's leadership, creating a more divisive nature to the Black Panther Party's interactions with other black liberation organizations. Anthony admitted to influencing Cleaver to carry out a campaign of aggression against organizations in the area which didn't accept the leadership of the party in San Francisco. Many of these radical individuals and organizations would either close down or flee from the city. When this terror didn't turn into open warfare, the FBI directed Anthony to encourage a conflict between the LA chapter of the party and the United Slaves Organization, which would turn violent. In turn, he was also advised to bring the party closer to white left organizations, which would estrange them from the black communities who they reserved their combativeness for. At the same time, William O'Neal would go about attempting to dissolve the Illinois branch's Rainbow Coalition. This was a coalition, led by the party, which included other poor people's organizations, notably the Young Lords Organization and the Young Patriots Organization. William O'Neal went about spreading rumors and lies about the Black Panther Party, and the leader of the Illinois chapter leader, Fred Hampton, in order to create tensions between not only the members of the Rainbow Coalition, but the community at large. On December 3, 1969, leader of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party and founder of the Rainbow Coalition, Fred Hampton, taught a political education class. He and members of the party would return to his apartment where they would eat a meal prepared by William O'Neal. O'Neal slipped a secobarbital, a sedative, into Fred Hampton's drink. O'Neal would leave, and Fred Hampton would fall asleep while on the phone early in the morning with his mother. At 4 a.m., a 14-man armed police patrol arrived at the apartment and began a raid at 4:45 a.m. The FBI had supplied this group with intel from O'Neal on the layout of the apartment and coordinated with Fred Hampton's drugging. The police would shoot Mark Clark, who was sitting guard with a shotgun on his lap, which he would fire from a death convulsion. This would be the only shot fired by the Panthers that night. The police were loose-fingered with their shots, firing over 99 shots according to the independent investigation. Hampton's pregnant partner, Deborah Johnson, would be removed from the bedroom as Fred Hampton remained incapacitated in the bed. In the chaos, Fred Hampton was partially awoken in a sedated state, however ended up being shot in the shoulder during the initial raid. Upon the discovery of him and his wound, the raiding team shot him twice in the head, executing him. People often look to this as the beginning of the end of the Black Panther Party. However, the real beginning of the end came upon the release of Huey P. Newton. Newton returned to find a very different situation than when he went to prison in 1968. The party had lost its connection with much of the black community, which all could see. However, the FBI would manufacture miscommunication and misunderstandings between the East Coast faction led by Eldridge Cleaver and the quote-unquote Party Center or West Coast faction led by Huey P. Newton. This would lead to the violent split between the two and within the party. The two notable deaths of the Black Panther Party were the Cleaver supporter Robert Webb and the Huey loyalist Sam Napier, the second being killed in revenge for the first, who was killed by alleged Huey supporters. This furthered the regression of the Black Panther Party from national growth, and its branches would begin to recede. At the time of the return of Huey, there was a hope for a revival and a pivot back to the core of what the Black Panther Party had come to the scene to do. However, this final FBI-manufactured split solidified the regression of the party to something much less politically consequential. The Black Panther Party would close down all but the Oakland branch after 1974. In 1982, the party would thoroughly dissolve. COINTELPRO had done its job.